Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this session, Best in Class, How Wells Fargo and Honeywell Take a Modern Approach to IT Organizational Management. My name is Parker Collier, and I will be the monitor for this session. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Craig Ferrara. Craig is the head of value and adoption at BigPanda. In this role, Craig focuses on measuring and illustrating the impact of BigPanda within our customers' evolving organizations, and over time, working with our customers to make updates and adopt new features that maximize that impact year after year. Prior to BigPanda, he was the Senior Director of Value and Adoption Strategy at SAP. Craig earned his degree at University of California, Davis. Craig, I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome. Guys, thanks so much for having us. And we've got a great session set up here. I'm joined by two great panelists today. And we'll start with just a round of introductions for everybody before we go into our topics. But what we're hoping to do is everyone who's in attendance will take away two different stories that arrived at a better place for IT operations than maybe these two companies were at previously. And there's different ways that everybody tends to get there. So I'll start with the round of introductions. So first and foremost, I'm joined by Jennifer Stern, who is the Executive Vice President and Head of Site Reliability Engineering. I do that every time, Jennifer, sorry, for Wells Fargo. As part of customer technology, Jennifer launched SRE at Wells Fargo and has the responsibility of ensuring operational excellence, stability, and availability of Wells Fargo technology products and services provided to customers. She has over 20 years experience leading organizations in finance, retail, technology, and she comes from JP Morgan Chase prior to Wells Fargo, where she was the cybersecurity COO and head of infrastructure as a service, among other roles. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here. My second panelist, Dr. Rachel Bailing, is Senior Director of IT Service Management at Honeywell and is a professor in the College of Doctoral Studies at Grand Canyon University, where she is a residency staff and dissertation chair. In her current role, Dr. Bailing oversees the Honeywell Incident Response Team, as well as the Problem, Change, Service Management, Analysts, and Knowledge teams as well. So there's quite a portfolio. Dr. Bailing joins Honeywell from roles spanning hospitality, transportation, higher education, aerospace, and supplier governance. Personal favorite brands, and forgive me, Dr. Bailing, for looking into this. I know that you've held roles at Panda Express and Jamba Juice. Not to downplay your role in aerospace, but I have more experience personally with those two organizations. Welcome, Dr. Bailing, and thank you for being here as well. I will say, as we go through this, I encourage everyone to use the chat and the Q&A. We will be on a first name basis. Mr. Ferrara is my dad, so we'll stay Craig and Jennifer and Rachel for the session. And if you guys have any questions, please, again, put them into the Q&A. So let's get started. And we're going to kind of tell a bit of a story with how we go through these sessions here today. And some of the questions that we've got are meant to kind of help us establish, where we've been, where we currently are at Wells Fargo and at Honeywell, and then talk a little bit about the journey that took us to the current state that we find ourselves in. So let's start with Wells Fargo, and I'll direct my first question, Jennifer, to you. And it would be great just for everyone in attendance today to talk a little bit about the historic and current operating models at Wells Fargo. And just kind of a description of each one of those would be a great foundation for us.
Sure, that would be my pleasure. When I joined, much like a lot of financial services company, they come where they have these traditional IT operating models, where they deliver products and services using waterfall methodology. And if you know a little bit about waterfall methodology, I think that some of it was born in the federal sector, and it was resistant to change, right? To make sure that everything was cared for and to reduce operational risk. Well, fast forward to the digital age, post 2000, companies have to start to deliver products and services, basically at the speed of light to enable their customers, their business partners, and so on and so forth. So what we've really seen in financial services in all the banks is this transformation, the agile transformation taking shape to deliver products and services. And that has, aligns and enables a product-aligned IT operating model where you don't have these traditional, organizations. You have product teams that deliver feature functionality where the teams are cross-functional and can respond quickly to get our products and services into the hands of our customers, whether it's resolving an issue or it's providing a new service that our customers are delighted by. So that's a little bit about the technology transformation in financial services and what we're seeing occur across the industry. And that's how we deliver products and services faster that are always on.
No, that makes perfect sense. And would you say, and I'm just boiling things down, how well are teams right now, if you've got kind of this agile approach to building products and supporting things, just to iterate a little bit further, how are teams working together if they are managing separate services and may be kind of related or dependent on top of one another?
Well, obviously we leverage a lot of the agile methodology and traditional Scrum to deliver products and services that care not only for the features that we provide, but also are secure from the start and make sure that we have things like logging and, tracing enabled for our customer journeys so that we know where all our customers are in their experience and their quality of service. So, it's really, boils down to this agile transformation to give light to the product-aligned IT operating model.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and we're finding that more and more of the companies that BigPanda is working with are pursuing a lot of the exact same things in order to keep teams in line with one another, but also to manage changes in a complex ecosystem. So, Rachel, gearing some of the question to you now for Honeywell, tell us a little bit about Honeywell's transformation to your current operating model. So what was the legacy model? How are teams building and supporting services, applications, or the different, we'll say the different pieces of infrastructure inside of Honeywell, given that it's a very complex business, and how you've transformed that into your current agile approach to IT operations?
Thank you. So just looking back at what Jennifer just talked about, we're kind of on the other side of that, right? So my model is more about the service, getting it back up and running when there's a service that it has an outage. So we have very heavy manufacturing here within Honeywell. And historically at our sites, our assets, our infrastructure, all of that was not very well inventoried, should I say. And each one of the teams that needed to jump in and help if one of those application or assets or services had an outage, sometimes kind of hard to know which part of the big Honeywell beast was going to be able to help with that. So our historically, that model had been very siloed across our teams, between our manufacturing sites and our IT teams. So the current model, some of the things that we've done is we've what we call taken back the streets. So we've taken all of those assets, applications, and really instilled a service owner mentality. So we don't have business owned compared to IT owned. We own them all, we support them all, we troubleshoot them all, and we're there to support the business to take that off of their plate and let them just keep doing what they do wonderfully, which is manufacturing, right? We also instilled really what we've called a command center model. So this doesn't replace our existing service desk, it complements it. So if for any reason one of our manufacturing sites across the globe gets stuck at service desk for more than 15 minutes, they have a place where we can go, where we put it into a command center where all of our infrastructure teams, commodity teams, our security teams and so forth, they can see that incident, they grab it, they action it so that we can quickly get our sites back up and running. So I would say between those two things, which is making sure that we have that visibility to what is in all of our sites, and then having a way to recover quickly, is probably two of the most significant things we've done in that model transformation.
Yes, and what I'm really looking forward to digging into in the next few minutes here is how you are able to get, and this is for both, for Wells Fargo and for Honeywell, how you are able to make that transformation, right? Because again, a lot of companies are, they would not describe themselves as being at a very mature state of IT operations because silos are pervasive, right? You have services and applications that are built that are developer supported, right? And a lot of times, it's human nature. When you build something and you support it, it's hard to relinquish, in some cases, this thought of actionability, right? And it's easy to have, impacting incidents that have a large blast radius affecting multiple services, applications, or infrastructure layers that can span multiple teams of ownership across those services and applications. And identifying where actionability actually lives is not only the end goal, but then also making sure that our teams are on board for, coming together and understanding that, hey, my piece of the pie is experiencing pain right now, but there's nothing for me to do. And I have the correct knowledge that has confirmed that to me. And I know that my global command center, for example, has this well in hand and will inform me of anything that needs to happen from my side of the business. So let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of the current state of operating models today. And Jennifer, my first question will be to you, which is, as someone who is the head of site reliability engineering, how has the SRE operating model benefited Wells Fargo today? And, take the question however you will, talking about products and services or going from siloed traditional IT, but how has that model really benefited Wells Fargo?
That you said. So, this cross-silo organizational problem and figuring out, where is the problem. Two things. SRE is a nation without borders, right? And SRE is also blameless. So it's mostly about fixing the problem. And one of the things I think that a lot of companies, and including, all financial services, is we have, a customer comes in and we define, our teams by our customer's journey really, but customer comes in, applies for a credit card or they apply for a loan, that like most financial services, we, have relationships with Equifax. So it's not just inside the company. People are coming in through the front end, and then we might be doing a credit check or something like that on the back end, as all financial services do. So it's about finding where the problem is, transcending the different organizations and into vendors and relationships we have with our business partners, right? So try troubleshooting or finding the needle in the haystack there. And that's why things from an observability perspective, like distributed tracing, are real important, using W3C standards to be able to trace a customer's experience, at a vendor, on the front end, in the back end, processing, at the credit check, down to the customers, getting the keys to their new home, right? So you have to find it wherever it is. So that's why, telemetry is really important, and that it can't be contained to a single organization. And it's everyone's problem, right? At the end of the day, to drive customer satisfaction and good quality products and services. So in terms of the, the benefits of the SRE operating model, obviously, one thing I'd like to cover here is that people often think about products and services that we deliver, to our customers at any organization. And that generally is equated in most people's minds to like app dev work. And at the end of the day, it's interesting because operations is all about the customer. and is all about the customer quality of the products and services. So, a new feature functionality is great and all, but if the customer has a terrible experience with the product, you're 7 times more likely to take an impact to your brand. So when you think about products and services delivering, to production, that's where, DevSecOps really takes shape. And it's important to think about the feature, the security, and the operational readiness of the product. Because often the operational readiness, if you don't get it right and the thing, does not perform, or it does perform, has everything to do with your overall customer satisfaction. So I equate DevSecOps, and SRE enables DevSecOps to really, improving the customer experience and making sure, it's kind of like the executive dev, sec, and ops are kind of like the executive, legislative, and judicial branches that together, hopefully, they deliver like a working law, or working something that's going to benefit, all of the nation's constituents. And sure that we balance. That's really important. The benefits of SRE. Making sure that we care for the non-functional requirements for all the different products and services that we provide. One other thing I'd like to say on this topic, my second point, is that, SRE, like I mentioned, cares about the customer. And sorry, I think my light just went off. My motion
the
detector.
Conference room?
Motion detector.
No, I'm in my office, but it's a new office because we all just returned to work. So apologize. But the last point I want to bring forward to the team here and the community is that, this is really SRE. When I started doing SRE many, back as early as 2013, because I spent some time at Google and I spent a decade at IBM. And when I came here, I started SRE out of frustration because I had walked into a high severity incident. And I was like, we have to there's these phases of maturity model for SRE, for reactive, predictive, and to autonomic healing. And so a lot of times SRE is born out of the reactive phase where, something was missed, whether it was the quality or the monitoring or the observability. Once you have those types of things, you move into this preventative model and are able to care for all the non-functional requirements. And then you get into autonomic healing and CSAT and Net Promoter Score for driving, more business into, the business's funnel. And that equates to a competitive advantage in the marketplace. So all those things are really kind of important. And, this is my third or fourth organization. I'm now running consumer technology with, more than 1,000 applications and chief technology office. And can you believe that we got to 0 incidents just by doing a basic kitchen sink SRE scrum, focusing on everything. And that basically freed up the organization to be able to work on more important work and accelerate agile delivery of products and services. So, that's, I think, how SRE enables the organization. Sometimes you have to slow down and look at the incidents and do all the needful things to free yourself up to go faster.
That's a great point. And one follow-up question is, when you're looking at the benefits, and Rachel, I'm going to ask you the same question as a follow-up as well, which is, have you seen fewer customer-facing incidents then that have affected the brand as a result of this as well? Is there, and you don't have to mention any metrics, but generally speaking, you talked about fewer incidents or getting to 0 incidents. Those would be customer-facing incidents, but the teams are still handling kind of lower priority workload. Is that right?
Yeah. I think that SRE reduces, at any company, the impacts, right? Because they're SRE is not going to give up. As soon as they have the incident, they're going to have their subtask and everything that needs to be fixed by the app dev,
right,
or the operator, or maybe there's a problem with like a platform with like logging or something like that. So you fix those things, and I like to think of like an incident as a signal. Usually underneath all of these things, it's either systemic or there's like an enterprise gap somewhere. Like for instance, the testing isn't automated, or they're not doing in-sprint automation, or they're not doing BDD or TDD to develop the test as they're developing the feature, which is really the success criteria. So like at the end of the day, behind each one of these incidents, there's a lesson to be learned by the team. And 9 times out of 10, it's, impacting or something that all the other teams are struggling with as well. So you have to pay attention to the incident to get an early indication on a particular theme that you might need to address across the entire company. So I scrum every day on every single incident that we have in consumer technology for 1,000 applications. And we use the error budget and things like that. And those types of controls really help us, in any SRE organization, if you've ever read a Google's SRE handbook, to drive that quality that you're looking for so that you can free up your organization from this like technical debt that may be looming. And I remember when I left Chief Technology Office at Wells Fargo to come and run consumer technology, and say like, okay, Jennifer, like you've gotten rid of all the incidents. Come do it in consumer technology. Can you do it? And the answer is yes. And we've done it at multiple financial firms, and I learned from the best, at IBM and Google how to do this. So it is a dream, and it is possible for those, that warrior princess who was the SRE. It's possible, and it's like sometimes it feels like the unattainable goal, but it's within reach if you scrum,
Right.
So.
No, I'm so glad you referenced the video, by the way. Thank you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Honeywell. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits of the service owner mentality. Kind of similar question, but in the context of Honeywell, the new operating model and the benefits that it has brought to the business.
No, thank you. And just kind of going off what Jennifer said, I loved how you mentioned that the team is boundaryless, right? So very similar to the service owner mentality is not looking at just my service or my application and how it affects my users, but looking at that upstream and downstream infrastructure. So the benefit of this model came into play probably the most prevalently during COVID, because we had manufacturing sites that had to pivot from producing manufacturing items and aerospace parts to pivoting masks, right? So how do you do that with an industry that is decades and decades old? So to be able to do that, incident response and the service owner mentality had to be able to step back and go, how do we get our sites back up and running when there's even a smell of a major incident? How do we make sure that all hands are on deck, looking at that incident, making sure that we jump in and help without it going through a convoluted path to maybe the right team or not? So we had to remove that noise. We had to simplify the escalation and make sure from a technological perspective that we could trust within ServiceNow, our CMDB, and how we had inventoried those assets. So we knew what site had what asset, who was the owner, and we had our command center standing by there to help support to get that incident resolved. Because at the end of the day, whether we're manufacturing engines for major airlines or we're manufacturing masks for our nurses and doctors during the peak of COVID, either way, the world relies on the service and the products that we produce. And when our sites can't produce, we kind of tie their hands. So this model, the number one benefit was that it removed those borders, and it said, forget who you are, forget what your title is, but if you have a possible option to support, jump in and support. And I think having Sheila Jordan at the helm here in our IT organization has just switched that mindset, and now the technology and the model can follow.
No, that's great to hear. And when you're looking at the effects of having, forget your title, get in here and help fix these incidents to keep manufacturing, in this case is the example that you gave, manufacturing, producing at all times. Have you guys been able to measure by, say, manufacturing site, for example, productivity increases, gains, or maintained productivity as a result of switching or maturing your operating model to this service owner mentality?
So trust me when I say that Honeywell, like many other major organizations, never has a lack of data, should I say. So yes, so we have significantly monitored the launch of this model to be able to see, are we making a difference? What are our key performance indicators? Like, are they able to hit their quarterly goals? How much downtime are they having at a manufacturing site due to a priority one or a major incident? Or even what might seem more ticky-tacky at a technical level as like a priority 3, but really impacts a user's experience if you're someone on the shop floor that has one laptop that has an entire line connected to your laptop. So we've been able to step back and on a monthly and quarterly basis, we put that metrics in front of our manufacturing site leadership team and say, how are we doing? How are you doing? And are we on the right track? So having not only the data, but that that feedback from the folks that are looking at the data to see if this model is really helping them or not.
No, that's great to hear. And yeah, we do hear a lot about the proliferation of data and analytics, and the proliferation of observability and alerting and visibility into service applications, process, devices, and all these things that are both a benefit and a curse, right? In many ways, it can be very easy for organizations to consume too much data, get a little bit bogged down in assessing that information, and in some cases, even hire entire teams to help assess data and determine actionability and areas of optimization. So right there with you on that. But I'm glad to hear that you guys have you've got the measurables behind the success. And it sounds like that's the case as well at Wells Fargo, which is actually a perfect transition into the next topic of conversation today. So we talked a little bit about the current operating models and the benefits that they've brought to the business. But before we can transition or start making the investment to changing how things are done, right? You can go to someone and say, yeah, these are the benefits. This is what we can expect to see. But there's got to be, in many cases, investments that are made, right? There's changes to technology and tooling. Organizational change costs money, right? So what I want to talk about next is the justification for changing the operating model that you had previously to the SRE model, to the service owner model, right? And I want to talk from two perspectives. The first one is, from a technology perspective, there was investment probably made in new tools. And, if you could give us some insights into what those were or what those are for the business today, how that's changed. And then how you said, okay, this is what we need to do to change. And then how did you make the argument back to the business in order to start with the transformation? So I don't mean to be verbose, but really it is just how are you justifying changing this, changing your operating models back to the business? And Jennifer, we'll start with you and the Wells Fargo story.
Sure. I mean, I guess what happens when you have an entire organization that no longer has any incidents or problem tickets? It's like I mentioned before, it's like freeing up a whole extra side of your organization so you can go fast and deliver more product. Like most organizations in the initial stages of SRE, which is usually a response to, some incidents or, the team just being flogged with low-level task or operational or technical debt. When you free those people up, they can contribute back into the product development, even if they are in a different organization, or even if they're just in a separate team under that product for dev ops, and the other team is for app dev, which is often the case for companies in financial services for segregation of duties purposes. So when you free up those people, they're happier, they deliver more product, they innovate, and do things that you didn't expect them to do that give, your organization or your company or your customers, a specific value. So that's what happens when you free up that organization. So, we're a large bank. So can you imagine freeing up, operations for like all these, branch banking, loans, and like all these different products that we offer, rewards. It's like having a whole nother part of your organization, and suddenly, and it's just like the investment is minimal to get that return on investment just with the like daily scrum. So it's really transformative, and it's amazing because like you can do it in a year, you can do it in 6 months, and some companies maybe take 2 years. But with my first organization, it only took like a year before there was nothing, and there was only feature functionality, and the product teams gained a better understanding of what it meant to deliver something. So it drives a lot of operational efficiency. And I can't say that some of the capabilities and the tools are certainly what we use to get there, whether it's distributed tracing or AIML capabilities for reduction of noise, and for autonomic healing of issues that, or suppression of alerts. Like all these things have to be acted by a person. And with the advancement in capabilities for distributed tracing and screen recording to see a customer's experience, with AI Ops, AIML, you can continue to really drive that down. And so with the investment in the practice for SRE and the investment in the capabilities, you can really see a benefit operationally and fiscally across the organization when you free up that whole team of operations supporting every product that a financial services firm has to offer.
Kind of think of it as reclaimed budget, right? You're spending money on FTEs to support products and innovation, but you want to dedicate as much of that as possible towards the innovation side rather than the support side. Curious, prior to, did you do any modeling around what you projected might be the benefit, or was it more, put this in motion and start looking and measuring the benefits in real time and watching that ramp up as the process got to a more mature state?
I mean, SRE, when I started SRE at Wells Fargo, it was organic. So I knew what was going to happen, but, from a modeling, every time you go through one of these transformations, and I've done a lot for, the various different companies I've worked for over the years, at the beginning, you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it. And so it's like sometimes looking down a dark tunnel, to be like, I don't know what I'm going to encounter. And nobody really believes that it can be achievable. We've done this 4 or 5 times now to the point where I know it is achievable, no matter what company or what organization or what their problems are. It just really takes, perseverance and a willingness to be curious and vulnerable, to know that you're not going to know all the answers, and to let your teams know that they're not going to know all the answers, and that's really all part of the journey, and so it was less about the T's and C's of the transformation and the fiscal responsibility, and it was more about the transformation of the company at hand in hearts and minds, because that's what gives life to innovation. If people enjoy coming to work every day and working on the challenges, and when they can visibly see the fruits of their labor or feel it, and reclaim that time, like when I was at Google, we had this 20% time, concept where they can really spend time to focus on driving innovation, or, doing something interesting for the company that could lead to a competitive advantage. And this is exceptionally important today, because it is very hard to find, the good talent. Like, can I find an SRE off the street? It'll be hard to find someone who knows. An SRE is a generalist, so they know maybe a little bit about performance testing, load testing, functional regression testing, observability, distributed tracing, logging, AI/ML capabilities, Logstash, like all data science, so you really are generalists and have to have an appreciation for those. I'm not going to be able to find somebody, in the marketplace that has all those skill sets. It's very difficult and it's very competitive. So, I take the approach of inner sourcing and training the teams, and they love it because they get to learn new skills. They get to be freed up, and they get the creativity to develop and innovate products. And that's what, you see a lot of the technology companies and startups being born out of are great ideas, and freedom to develop those ideas.
Right. So, well, let's hear a little bit about kind of the same topic from Honeywell. So, Rachel, when you were justifying a change in operations, whether it be a spend on new tools, organizational change, change to process, how did you approach that transformation to justify the spend or even just the investment in time that it would take in order to execute against that?
It's a great question. And part of this answer is actually in the transformation strategy, but let me touch on it a little bit. So the way I justified it, first and foremost, was I found out what the pain points were. So we actually spent a lot of time, myself and my peers, traveling to our customer, to our manufacturing sites, seeing the pain they were feeling, seeing how a lack of an IT connection was slowing them down to responding and resolving incidences. And then we just looked at the data. So first we talked to the humans, right, from both the IT perspective and the manufacturing sites to see what is the pain, what slows you down from, as Jennifer said, being amazing and bringing your heart and soul to work. Like, how do we get rid of the noise and the stuff that's non-value added so you can get back to what you do best to add value at Honeywell? And then once we layered that with the data, so we kind of stood back and said, all right, what are the critical measurements of an incident? And some of that is, how long does it take from the time a site says, hey, I have a major incident. My entire site cannot work right now, or an entire region of the United States cannot work right now. How long does it take from the time that's reported to the time that it's acknowledged and the incident response team is stepping in, pulling the right people together? And then how much of that total time, from the time someone reports it to the time it is resolved and my team, my customers are back up and working again, how much of that time was spent actually troubleshooting it, actually doing the technical workaround and solutioning? Or was it spent just on getting to the right person to even look at the incident? So the way that I was able to justify, and I say me, I mean my infrastructure team, my database team, like all of these teams working together in the command center and service owner model. This is us all looking at that saying, how much of that total time that my end user or my customer is feeling a pain from an outage, and where are we spending that time? And so we were able to step back and go, why don't we just pilot this with my infrastructure team? So any incidences that come in from servers and from network, how about we just pilot it with these guys? And we did it for 3 or 4 months, and we saw significant improvement to the end user experience with IT. And so we said,
no
all right.
Kidding. So
yeah,
breaking down a timeline and showcasing that there is an impact to acknowledgement, assignment, triage, remediation steps, kind of looking at each piece of where can we affect this. You were able to pilot, show the benefit, and were you able to project the financial impact in bringing those kind of same improvements to other areas of the business as well?
Yes, but this is me, was super pedestrian in the math. So I literally said, here's the trend of the incidences across all of my support teams. and I did some very simple math to calculate the cost of an outage, the cost of the technical team, the cost of the application being down, the site not being able to produce or ship. And I did very simple math to calculate the cost of a technical bridge of an outage. And I just said, here's where we are right now with no teams in command center and not following the service owner model. And then I said, well, here's where we were from an incident reduction and an MTTR reduction from having these 6 teams in my command center. And then I was able to project out, okay, so by 2023, if I get all my teams in command center model, here's the estimation of reduction in incidences and the cost to the business when we have an outage. So I know super, super simple, not a very complex way to it, but it told the story, and it helped people to take away that emotional reaction, like Jennifer said, of we don't know if this is going to work. We don't know if we're going to fail. It kind of removed some of that anxiety and said, it's okay if we make mistakes. It's okay if we're not perfect with this, but we are going to be super agile in how we approach it. We're just going to do better tomorrow. Like literally, let's get together tomorrow after this incident and let's just do better on that one. And that was how the organization was able to go, okay, Rach, we'll give it a try, because it wasn't that pressure of the Big Bang Theory of all or nothing. It's coming down from the mountaintops that we're now changing our entire model and ye shall follow. It was never that approach.
Gotcha. So it sounds as though there's kind of, might be oversimplifying, but 3 different sides of this. There's the budgetary impact to diverting time spent to innovation rather than preservation or support of services. There's the revenue impact to increased service stability that comes from these models. And then I'd say the third one is that we'll call it the less tangible benefits, though certainly still measurable, of brand preservation or maintaining a brand's reputation, as well as the X factor of having just happier, more fulfilled operators that are not running around with their hair on fire all the time.
And there's another benefit too with the trust in IT. So I'm sure my company's not the only one that my sites were even telling me we don't really even want to log a ticket because it might get lost. It might not be taken seriously. IT may not understand the impact of that one computer on the shop floor that makes me not ship. And by changing this model, we were able to say, please trust us. We hear you. And how can we simplify it so that you can report all your incidences? So like Jennifer said, those are indicators of infrastructure issues or more systemic problems that if I don't know about them, I can't fix them. So I think that's one I would like for you to add to your summary, is just that branding and that trust within our company, with our manufacturing sites, to help them trust IT again.
100%. So we are coming up on time. And I know in our pre-planning sessions, spoiler for everybody in the audience here, we actually had one more question. But what I'd like to ask is Jennifer and Rachel, and we'll go to Jennifer first, just for any closing thoughts that you have on the topic. Really, it's, again, advice to companies that are trying to execute some of the excellent, the process and organization that you have, and trying to realize some of the results that both Wells Fargo and Honeywell are seeing. Jennifer, what would you offer as advice just in closing?
I think what I would say is that really, if you don't have SRE at your company, but you have incidents or you're in their operational space, or if you're passionate about fixing things once and for all, just start. And I think it's important for both the leadership to be in the details as well as their teams, and to not be like really hands off. You really, to deliver great products and services to your customers, really to get that competitive advantage in the market, you have to keep your ear to the ground. And the only way you can keep your ear to the ground is if you're anchoring yourself in what's the reality of what's occurring, with our customers and for our products. And a great place to learn about customer experience is in operations. I highly advise people, always to spend a couple years in cyber, as I did, was eye-opening, and I'm a certified ethical hacker as a result, but also in operations and engineering, and also in like product. So I think all of those things like give you a real good view of what you need to do to deliver, products and services that people love and want to use every day. And a great place to understand, how much people love your products is in operations, of course, because you get to hear everything. And that keeps you anchored in like what to do your products and services and really get that customer satisfaction that you're looking for in that user experience. So I guess, leaders, if you're out there, or, enthusiasts, start SRE at your company. Leaders, make sure that you're involved in all the aspects of your team and helping them grow and keeping your ear, to the ground to understand what's happening in your organization as well as with your customers. And I guess that's my advice and feedback, to the audience, and innovate, So don't be afraid to do some cool stuff.
I really appreciate it. It's great advice. And Rachel, what would be your advice as we close out our thoughts here for the audience?
Well, I would say first and foremost, when you attend sessions like this, these can sometimes seem like it's just an hour or 45 minutes of your time, but I'm praying that something in this 45 minutes between both what Jennifer has presented and what I've shared just sparks a little bit of light. I know I was in a session where I saw the UPS incident response leadership, and they're the ones that turned me on to the incident commander protocol, which has changed my entire life in Honeywell. So it could just be one little presentation. But I ask you that when you watch these kind of seminars and you hear these kind of ideas, go back to your team, go back to your stakeholders, your end users, your customers, the folks that are upstream from your process or downstream from your process, and do what I call a UDO exercise, undesirable observations, and have them just come all together in a room, whether it's a virtual room using like a Miro board, or it's face-to-face with old school, right? With Post-it notes and flip chart paper. But get their input on what is undesirable from being a user or a consumer of your process, and get their feedback. Because at the end of the day, Jennifer and I can talk about models and tools and strategies all day long, but at the end of the day, it's the humans. It's the humans that can tell you the simplest way to solve the problem, and they can usually tell you how it needs to be fixed. And then you put a bunch of that feedback together, of course, validate it by data. We talked about that almost this whole entire 45 minutes, but then get down to just the few things that matter. So I think that would be my advice. And hopefully everyone got a little piece and a little spark, an idea. I know you've heard from Jennifer that the SRE path is a wonderful path. So there's a lot of things for you to take back and just start looking into. And with that, excellent. I'll turn it back to you. You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you both, really. Again, for everyone here, we're talking to two very passionate people who care about maintaining just good process and supporting their customers and their business. And I think that's what we're all here to do today. That's why we're at Resolve. So firstly, just want to thank you both for your time and for sharing your story. I know we had a few questions come through in the chat. What we'll likely do is follow up with you guys and potentially answer a few of those questions that came through, as we are well over our time, but that's what happens when we're all having fun. So again, thank you. Parker, I'll turn it back over to you. I think there's a couple items you wanted to discuss here at the very end. So thank you, everybody. It's been a good session. And Parker, take it away.